Hello, it's Joyful Hermit. I hope this will be loud enough. I'm trying a different location. You can see it's an unfinished room. I have trim around this window. I decided this wall in here in the living room here needed to have a window, and I just cut a hole through it and put in a window. That's as easy as it is to do a window, because right out there is plants and things. Excuse me. I did yet another video. I did a fourth video already, and I keep deleting them, but this one, that phone got too hot again. So I don't know if that one, but I'm going to move on to a different topic. And but the reason I hadn't done videos is my neck has been so terrible. I've been very ill because of had dry needling on it on Tuesday, and that put me out. Just terrible disorientation and pain, and sick all over from the spine and the nerves and then up into the brain. It really gets affected. And then also then on Thursday with physical therapy, I go 45 minutes twice a week, and it's about 3/4 of a mile away, but he just worked on, I said, just work on my neck. We're not going to do any kind of needles in anymore because my neck is just too messed up to deal with it. But then that had me out. But so then this afternoon I was out and did a video on hermit life, and I'm trying to follow through my spiritual life, but also my hermit life, and the process of being canonically approved and how that's going. But I don't know what all got caught off on this last video that I did outside because the phone turned off and I didn't know it, because the sun was coming in and I couldn't see the reflections. So I'm going to move on to my other topic that I wanted to do. Let me get this out of the way here. You don't need to be looking at my construction things. You see enough of it here. Yesterday was the feast day of Saint-Fiacre, and that can be spelled different ways: F-I-A-C-R-E, F-I-A-K-E-R, F-I-A-C-H-R-E, all the same. However, there are two other saints named Fiacre also. This one is Fiacre of Brule. This is the one that we most hear of, is this Saint-Fiacre. And he's since really for years, he into the 1600s even and before, was commemorated on August 30th. And so before that, there were a few other days that he was commemorated, but that's the main one, and that was yesterday. And it was last night I was doing more research on him, because he's always been a hermit that I've really liked. He was a gardener. But I hadn't realized that he left Ireland. He for one reason, I read two different things. One reason was, and both are probably accurate, was that people found out more about him, and he had just too many people coming to him. He needed more solitude. He wanted to live his hermit life. He had already been a priest, an abbot of a monastery, then he became a hermit. And all these people started to find, and he also was very good with curing people using herbs and different medicinal plants. He had that gift, and he was trained in that. He grew up in a monastery and educated in a monastery, lived in a monastery from an early age. His parents took him there to be educated and to be brought up. So he had those gifts and word spread. So he, but also though, I'd read that people wanted him also to have more involvement in diocese. And he did not want that either. He didn't want to be a bishop. He didn't want to be deluged by people. So he fled to France to get away. So that appealed to me because And my other video, if it comes through okay, up to a certain point, I'll try to fill in then, but I don't know how far it went, but it was more on my canonical hermit process. And what I discovered when I was simply looking online a couple of nights ago, maybe 3 nights ago, well, maybe it's Thursday night, a couple nights ago, I looked up because the canon lawyer chancellor had written to me and said, well, there's lots of private professed hermit. I looked online, no, they're not. I was trying to look up what's the percentage of private to canonical canon law hermits. And I don't find, there's no percentages given, but I don't find private hermits. And out of viewers, there's only been 2 that have mentioned that they are hermits. And myself makes 3. And I don't know that much about the one, but the other one is a very authentic hermit, really living the life, working hard and in solitude. I mean, unfortunately lives in an apartment, so there's noise around, but is not deluged by people. And in fact, make sure not. Doesn't want to, isn't up for it, and has lots of work she's doing to earn money, to survive. It's a matter for her of survival, and also dealing with health issues too. So not terrible ones, but I mean, not terminal in that sense, but very difficult ones. So, but she's living the hermit life in poverty, truly. So pray that people buy the goods that she makes and sells. And also with her writing project that gets published and that she makes money in order to make ends meet. It's getting down to that. But she is wonderfully balanced, not lonely, not panicking. She relies on God. That's what hermits do. A hermit that is truly in the vocation and intended for it, chosen for it, chosen and called by God. God will see them through, and they won't have issues going on or needs to start this or that. And those things, or to run a retreat center or anything like that, have jobs that have lots of people. That's more indicative of someone who maybe would be a consecrated virgin or start a religious order. I think it would be great if I'd have someone in mind who I think would be a great Mother Superior of a religious order for older people. There aren't any religious orders for older people. She'd be excellent in that capacity, and would have activity then, and could also have private time for prayer. But as is, all the canonical hermits that I discovered online aren't in compliance with the canon law in 1, 2, or 3 aspects, or with what the Catechism says in 920, 921, what a hermit is in order to be in consecrated life of the church. Oh, I covered that more in the other, but that's why Saint-Fiacre I realized Saint-Fiacre is my mentor. He is authentic. He is, for my stage of hermit life, which will be 25 years on September 13th, when I started my practicum, and then it'll be 24 years on December 29th since my formal vows. But they weren't to a to a bishop. So, and at that time, my spiritual father and I hadn't even heard of canonical approval or canon law for hermits. And I'm glad we didn't, in a way. And I still think the jury's still out on the canon law because, well, that's in that other video. But I really found Saint-Fiacre, born around 600 in Ireland, died in 670, on August 18th in 670 in France. But he embodies, at my phase of hermit vocation, the authentic hermit life and is going to be a marvelous mentor for me, because he had arrived at a point where God did give him a ministry of sorts, but it was still protected. He wasn't deluged by people in France, even when he got to France and started his hermitage and some other things. But I'll go through what I found out about him. I already mentioned his birth and his death. And he's Fiacre of Brule. He was a priest, abbot, hermit, gardener, and really gifted in medicinal plants and healing. More on that later. But Brule is in the area of France, northern part of France, sort of central northern, and it's in the I forget what it's called, county, not a county, but a region, the Brie region, where they make Brie cheese. I love Brie cheese, but it's not good for anemia, iron deficiency, dairy products, nor for kidneys. So I can just stop my little temptation right there. Get my glasses on, read my notes. I don't get off track. He became known for sanctity, obviously. As I said, skill in curing ailments, herbalist, and he was great in praying. He loved to pray. And so all these things are interests that I have. I haven't really done much with my herb garden here. It isn't complete. I did put in some horehound. I make horehound tea and stuff in the winter, but I usually haven't been able to give, people don't want to have my concoctions. Even my liqueurs that I made, Joyful Hermit's Mystical Mist and a lemon balm, herbal liqueur and things, guaranteed to cure what ails you. No, not really. But the herbals that I would make for colds and coughs and things did help people. But he actually ended up more laying on of hands, because he became so conformed to God that he, and of love, pure love, that he received spiritual gifts to further help uplift the world, the body of Christ. That's part of that's a big part of why God has hermits. They have the time and the inclination, the calling, and they've been chosen. And therefore they're able to live the life without being lonely, and focus in and to be authentic, and to go without being noticed. And no one needs to know they're hermits. They don't have a need to display that. People will come if they have a need, and if they start noticing, this person is good at helping me sort through problems, or this person has a place that I can stay for the night. That was his ministry later in life. In addition to helping people with ailments, travelers, if they needed a stopping point to spend the night, he built a room, a little hostel for travelers to stay. Now, that didn't mean it was like a busy retreat house for a diocese. Infrequent back in the 600s, 650 to 670, say, that people traveled. They would walk places, but generally not like being on our freeways where people are coming and going on vacations. No. But infrequently, someone would be out wandering, and word would spread. If you need a place, this priest has a spot. You can stay there. He has an extra room for someone. So that became like a side ministry, a mission. And they spent the night. He wasn't there chatting with them all day or talking over their spiritual lives per se. but I'm sure if they asked something, he would, but they'd get up in the morning and be on their way. Probably offer them some bread and some vegetables, an herbal drink to help strengthen them. So that was something that he did, and it was ironic because I have thought, and this would motivate me to get this place finished. I've always been intrigued, way back from when I had the anchorage back in 1999, that with my rooms and things, that I finished that place, that I would have like a bed and breakfast for people with spiritual intentions who would want to come just to get away for a night or a day or a weekend even, to have quiet, just quiet time. Choose a book if they wanted to read, go for a walk, go hiking, or walk around the common area or the ponds, get themselves something to eat out of the fridge. Or I have a little fridge for the patio. It's just so hot now, I don't have that finished painting anyway, but put that in a room upstairs. They would have their own quarters up there. And he also built an oratory to the Virgin Mary. I have a big bonus room upstairs that is the chapel room here, the oratory. Our Lady of Solitude, it's called, dedicated to the Virgin Mary. In the one of her titles is Our Lady of Solitude. So I thought about that, having something like that as a service, not a retreat center, but just a getaway, a quiet, silent getaway. But people have mentioned, and I don't have the place done, but that's something that Saint-Fiacre did. And it's not that I would do that, but I thought there again is something that this Saint-Fiacre is a mentor to me in, of having that added little ministry. And so I was just amazed at how God was bringing me Saint-Fiacre in a way that I never knew him before. Fiacre of Brule. His name itself, Fiacre, is pre-Christian. It's a pre-Christian Irish name, and it means battle king, or also derived from the word fiach, which means raven, the bird. And he, when he left Ireland, the area, this Brule, was originally, and when he lived there, it was called Brogillum, and it was renamed Brule at some time later, and it's known as Brule now. That area is, but actually, if you want to go there and see his hermitage area and the little church that was there, and his remains, I think, are there now. Again, they had been removed and then brought back when they developed it. France, the nation of France, developed it as a special site now. And there's gardens there that he would have been like he had. And they renamed it actually Saint-Fiacre, a little village of Saint-Fiacre. And his area there that he had in his honor. So, as I told you, as a child, he was raised in a monastery, educated there. He became a monk. He learned medicinal practices from the monks. He learned herbal skills, herbal and plants. He was educated by Bishop Conan, actually, by a bishop. He was ordained a priest at some point, elected abbot, or given, asked to be abbot. He did that for a while, abbot of a monastery. And I think that monastery that he was in, wasn't mentioned which one, but in Ireland, in the Western Isles of Ireland it was. And then he became a hermit then in Ireland. He felt this need for solitude then. And he went to a place near Fiacre's Well. It's known now as Fiacre's Well. near Sheestown, which is near Bennett's Bridge in County Kilkerry. His reputation there in Ireland spread for being good with people who were ill and medicinals. But also wanted him, as I'd read someplace, wanted him for more diocese work, bishop or abbot again, and he didn't want the people. He didn't want to be deluged by the people. He did not want to be involved in active church ministry or work. He was called as a hermit, chosen by God and called by God to be a hermit, and he knew it. So he fled to France. He sailed for France. He also very much eschewed preferential treatment. He preferred and wanted holy solitude. And I emphasize that he eschewed preferential treatment. He did not want to be considered respected, esteemed, recognized, important, or even as a hermit. He just wanted to be with God, conformed to God. In my video that I did, I may have to redo the whole thing, but I talk about being a nonconformist. A hermit is a nonconformist, a good type of nonconformist, not a radical, not an anarchist. But we don't conform to the world or even to the world of the church, the parish world or the diocese world. That's not our calling. We are conformed to God. That's where our conformity is. We conform to God and to oneness in God. And as the Catechism and maybe the Canon Law, I forget exactly, one or the other or both say, to become one with the crucified one. That's part of the hermit's journey and duty, actually calling. To be crucified and one with the crucified one. Crucified to the world. So in 628, so all these other things happened by the time he was approximately 28 years old. He arrived in Meaux, France. There he went to the bishop there, Bishop of Meaux, whose name was Faro, F-A-R-O, Bishop Faro. And Bishop Faro and his own father had been so kindly received by the Irish missionary Columbanus, Saint Columbine, or Saint Columbanus, as it would have been called back then, by which, or Saint Columba is our shortened term now. And this is sort of an irony. In the 1900s, he was born in the late 1800s, but Blessed Columba Marmion was born in Ireland, but ministered in France. He became an abbot in France. So that was 20th century, from the 7th, 13 centuries later, sort of followed the trajectory that Saint-Fiacre had in leaving Ireland and going to France for his ministry there. And Blessed Columba Marmion is also known as Dom Marmion, and he's a writer, a mystic, blessed, and was an abbot also. But he was not a hermit, per se, but a writer, great abbot. So, since Bishop Meaux had this wonderful, and his dad had this wonderful reception by the missionary Columba, St. Columba, who came from Ireland to France earlier, but in probably the early 600s or the late 500s, and ministered there, was a missionary in France. The Bishop of Meaux, Bishop Faro, had this wonderful regard And so he offered Fiacre a site at Brogillum, or Bruhl now, in the province of Brie. And there was a legend. Fiacre had approached the bishop and expressed his desire for holy solitude in a forest in France. And I also considered that France would have been warmer and less rain than Ireland. And that was also maybe a reason for coming, but not necessarily. But main thing was to get away from all the people who knew him in Ireland. And Ireland being an island, word could spread. Probably had a good networking system of communication there in Ireland. So there was a legend that he was told by Bishop Farrow that he could have as much land in this section of the province of Brie that he could furrow or plow in a day's time. But that a very suspicious type woman came along and told the bishop that because Saint-Fiacre was able to get quite a large area of land. I think I'd read sometime it's like 40 acres or something that he was able to trench around, to establish as his own hermitage area. So, but this mysterious woman, suspicious type woman, tried to convince the bishop that he had done it by witchcraft, and because also people had said that he had used his staff to top trees and to get briars pulled out in that time period too. But he was a gifted gardener, and he was close to God, so he was able somehow, though, to get this area in a day's time. But the bishop noticed that the woman was something not right with her and up to no good, trying to start that rumor and to get cast aspersions on Fiacre right off the bat. And the bishop instead thought of it as the hand of God helping Fiacre do all that. So didn't pay any attention. But Fiacre knew of this attempt to get him cast out, demeaned and just detracted, even calumniated, because it wasn't true. He wasn't using witchcraft. And he never allowed women on the premises. He had a strict rule, a strict law that no woman was to come to the hermitage or to the gardens or anything like that. And I'm not sure. I'm sure that he healed. Maybe he went to them. If they came to the edge or something, he probably went to the edge. They couldn't come into the hermitage. He didn't want that. If the legend's true or not, regardless, it was wisdom, even then. Because think of the rumors. If women can be tricky. Women can be tricky. I know. I call it tricky women syndrome. And they could be trouble for a priest and ruin his reputation easily. If they entered into the hermitage, they could say anything that happened to them. And so it's for his protection and for the women's protection, actually. Now, Fiacre had a sister. This is something I never knew. Her name was Syra, or Syra, probably pronounced Syra, Syra, sometimes known as Sire, but mostly referred to as Syra. And I think would probably be a derivative of Sarah, Irish Sarah. She came seeking him. She wanted a life of holiness also. Now, granted, he had been in the monastery all that time, but she had heard that he'd gone to France, had left Ireland. She came seeking him, but she was blind. She had lost her eyesight. And she was blind when she arrived in France. She found Fiacre, located where he was. People knew of this hermit living there and knew his name. Just as people around here, some of them know my name, not many. I think 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 people know my first name. 5 know my first name. Fiacre had this inspiration from God that his sister's vision was going to be healed, was going to be restored to her. And about the same time period, Syra also had a sense from the Holy Spirit. But her thing is that she would regain her sight, but at the same time, God revealed to her this spot, this area of land, this spot in the soil, where a Saint Savinian lay. Saint Savinian was from the 2nd and 3rd century, toward the end of the 2nd and the beginning of the 3rd century, a martyr. He had been a convert to Christianity and would not renounce Christianity, and he was beheaded for it. And on the spot that he was killed, people had never found his relics and didn't know where it was, and they were wanting to know, because that had only been, 400 years prior or so, 450 years prior. And they knew of this martyr, this saintly martyr, who had converted to Christianity around 275, but had lost track of where it had happened, but knew it was in that area somewhere. They knew it was in north-central France, near Troyes, in the Champagne region, by the river Seine. So, and his feast day happens to be on January 29th, which is one of my daughter's birthdays. So I thought that, and her name is close to that name. So I thought that was interesting. I always like these connections. So Sire went out and had this sensation of where this spot was, where this saint had been martyred, had been beheaded, and where his body was for about 400 years prior, the year 275. And she lay down on the ground, Sire did, and prayed for God to restore her vision. Her face was wet with tears because she was very devout and very sincere, asking God to restore her vision. And sure enough, there was a miraculous restoration of her sight, and indeed that was the spot where Saint Savinian had been martyred. So that was lovely. And it wasn't right there at her brother's compound, his hermitage, but it was on the River Seine. It was still close to the River Seine and near where his compound was. And since her eyesight had been restored, Fiacre helped his sister, referred his sister to become a nun, and she wanted to become a nun. With her sight restored, she was able to do that. And he sent her to the convent where Bishop Pharaoh's sister, Fara, F-A-R-A, was the Mother Superior. So Fiacre's sister went and was a very holy nun, and she died really quite a bit earlier than Fiacre did. She died somewhere around 640 or 648, and he died in 670. So he lived 70 years, and she may have been an older sister, so maybe she lived 50 years or 55 years or so, maybe 60. But died quite a few years before. Anyway, I just like these details. These people are real, and she was a saint. and Saint-Cyr, and I'm not sure exactly why. I looked her up, but I only did a brief. I didn't dig into finding a lot more about her. But I found more than I'd ever even known before. I was excited. So, Saint-Fiacre's relics, he died in 670. They were preserved in the original shrine there. In his property, well, I guess I'll get to that part when I get to more of his life, but this is what happened to him in the end. He died, and his relics were preserved. His body was put in a crypt in an original shrine in this in the oratory that he had built. In the he had a hermitage, a one-room cell hermitage. He had a one-room oratory to the Virgin Mary in honor of her. He had a one-room little hostel where people could stay, a guest hostel where a traveler could spend the night if they happened by and needed a place. And he had vegetable and herb gardens. That was his area, his compound, his where he lived all those years. That would be 42 years he lived there. Then, around 1568, his relics were transferred to the Meaux Cathedral near Seine-et-Marne, France. And in Meaux Cathedral is there now. But they had been transferred there. And in 1568, though, the Reformation had happened around 1526, and the Calvinists came in a little bit later on that. So in 1568, though, that's why his relics had to be transferred to that cathedral. It's because very angry and radical Calvinists were hell-bent on destroying his relics and his compound, and the site because they were against saints, they were against Catholic Church, and they wanted to do anything to destroy Saint-Fiacre's remains or anything to do with his life, to stop Catholics from remembering him even, and from considering his holy example. Because the Reformation caused Protestants to turn so against Catholicism. As I've mentioned before, they even took out books of the Bible, including the book of James at first. They took that out. They didn't like it because James includes it's by works and faith that we work out our salvation. He used that word. And the Protestants wanted to so diverge from Catholicism that they wanted to be faith alone, faith alone. That was one of their big calling points, and to say that the Catholics were wrong and were heretics. But of course we all know, in fact Protestants do too in reality, they put James back in. But we love God so much that we not only have faith and love him and want to do and be his and be one with him, and that we also want to show our love by loving others and doing acts of charity for others. So that's where works and faith come in. St. James is right. So they put that book back in, but the Calvinists were really, angry about all that. So his relics had to be protected, and they were. In the 17th and 18th century, they continued to be there at the Cathedral of Meaux, France, and they were the center of great devotion of Saint-Fiacre. Well, what a wonderful life. There were many healings during his life and after. He had many gifts, holy gifts. Several people came. One of the earliest ones who came was John of Matha. John of Matha was a priest and co-founder of the Order of the Most Holy Trinity. So he went to to Saint-Fiacre's relics back then, and that would have been when it was at Saint-Fiacre's site in the little village of Brule and his compound there. So that was in 1160 to 1213 was when John of Matha lived. Then in the 1600s are more people that we might know about. Anne of Austria, who ended up marrying a King Louis VIII, or the 13th of France. And Anne of Austria became Queen of France. She married King Louis XIII of France and was queen from 1610 until something like 1638 or so, or 1642. They came and venerated the relics. Then Bishop Jacques Bossuet. I've got books of his sermons over on my shelf. Bossuet, the great Bossuet. He was in the 1600s. He was a bishop, a theologian, and a writer of sermons and a preacher of sermons. Who else went? Vincent de Paul, that's a name we'd recognize. He lived 1581 to 1660. And he, of course, was did much service to the poor. He was a priest and the founder of the Congregation of the Mission of Vincentians, or the Vincentians. And he also founded the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul, the woman's religious order. St. Vincent de Paul went to that cathedral to pray and ask St. Fiacre's intercessions, to ask him to pray for him. Probably asked him to pray for his men's religious order and the work and the service to the poor, and also probably asked St. Fiacre's prayers to help with the Women's Foundation of the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. In 1999, just 25 years ago in Ireland, there was a site called Saint-Fiacre's Gardens, opened up in Irish National Stud and Gardens. That's in Tully, County Kildare, Ireland. So if you travel to Ireland, you can go to this shrine. It doesn't have his relics there, but it's a commemoration gardens developed. Probably they grow vegetables and herbs, I would imagine, because that was Saint-Fiacre's key. What he grew mostly was vegetables and herbs. And people often who came would be given vegetables, and then he would use the herbs for remedies, give them remedies to take home also. But his statue often, or images of him, show him with a trowel, a spade, what they used to call a furrow or a plow. Sometimes he's shown with that, and a basket with vegetables overflowing in it and some herbs sticking out. So that's how he's usually represented in images. He's a patron of many, many different things, but as you would guess it, he's a patron of growers of vegetables and medicinal plants, of herbs. He's a patron saint of gardeners, of plowboys, and of course now in our times it would be probably of men and women driving combines, plows, big huge combines on farms. He's the patron of victims of venereal disease. And what they commented is that probably was because women are carriers of venereal disease as are men. But women if a man has sex with a woman, that's how venereal diseases get spread. And back when, the women would often be blamed a lot for some of these things as being the temptress, and women can be. They can flirt, they can all that. Not always, though. Men can rape. Men can flirt and entice and seduce, but women can too. So it takes two to tangle. But anyway, they were thinking that maybe there was some connection there, since Fiacre was so firm about no woman was going to come into his hermitage. And it was even under threat of severe bodily discomfort, he put it, that if they did, they better not, in other words. And now this is interesting. He is patron of hemorrhoids, patron saint of hemorrhoids. People with hemorrhoids, ask him to heal, to help heal. Pray to him. No. Don't pray to him. Ask him to pray for your hemorrhoid problem. Ask his intercessions. Ask for his prayers. He obviously, because that is listed as a main one in most sites, among the top three, among the gardening and the herbs and the medicinal plants and hemorrhoids. Those three are mostly listed. So he must have powerful prayers and healings involving hemorrhoids. And if anyone's had them, they are nasty. Fistulas also. He's patron saint of taxicab drivers. However, it says in another source that the Catholic Church is against that. That they say, no, he's not patron saint of taxicab drivers. That actually came about because in 1650, Hotel Fiacre, named after him, in Paris, France. They named it after him because he had a hotel room, essentially, for travelers if they needed to stay. They hired out carriages. And the carriages that they hired out for people to be taken around the city when they would stay in the Hotel Fiacre started to become called fiacres, the actual carriages. So then cabs, taxi cabs, became called fiacres sometimes, and then that's how they made the connection to have him be patron saint of the cab drivers. But it says here, Catholics don't recognize taxi cab drivers as his patrons. Sort of quaint. I'm sure no one would get you in trouble if you did. If you're a cab driver or an Uber or a Lyft driver, I would say go ahead and ask Saint-Fiacre to pray for you. Why not? Ask any holy person to pray for you. That's something that won't be enforced. If they're having trouble enforcing canonical hermits who aren't in compliance, then they're not going to get you if you're a cab driver, for considering Fiacre your patron saint. Sense of humor here. I'm just teasing, or just that just struck me as funny when I read it, how the Catholic Church didn't go for that. He's also patron of box makers, florists, hosiers, so socks, and women's socks and men's socks. Pewterers, putting pewter coating on vessels, metal vessels. Tile makers, this is a good one, infertility. He obviously, with his herbal remedies and medicinal plants of various types, he must have been known in his lifetime to have efficacy with women who were infertile and wanted to have children. And there's many, many women today who would love to conceive and have children. So he's one to ask his intercessions. Always remember to say thank you when these prayers of others are answered. Oh, speaking of that, I did ask Father Vincent if there's any means of proving that our prayers, asking Charlene Richard, servant of God Charlene Richard of Louisiana in the United States, to intercede for his sister Vero. and her miraculous turnaround of health. And he said no, because there were so many different people praying that it would be hard to determine which prayers were specifically answered. But, I mean, it's just miraculous. And regardless, I'm thinking Charlene had a lot to do with it. I want to think that, so I guess I can. It makes it special, sort of, I think, since we all prayed, and one of our viewers drove to her grave and left. We'll find out when we're in heaven if we're not so overwhelmed by the love and the beauty and joy. Maybe we can ask, meet Charlene and ask, did you pray? Did you get the prayer for Sister Vero? So there's two other fiacres who are abbot saints in Ireland. And an abbot is the head of an independent monastery. I never knew the difference between like an abbot and a superior. But an abbot, it says, is the head of an independent monastery. And I didn't know this until the St. Benedict research and little talk video. But St. Benedict's is not really a religious order. It was considered a federation of independent monasteries. So they would have abbots, a Benedictine abbot, because they were all independent, different. Like there's one in St. Meinrad in the Midwest. They have an abbot. That's its own independent federation, their own unit. But they live the Benedictine. They're known as a Benedictine monastery. What is it? Eisenfeld in Germany. St. Meinrad. There's one over in Germany. I know of that one because that's how St. Meinrad's in the Midwest got its name. That's Saint-Fiacre, and he had a more strict regimen every day, and I'm going to tighten up mine. I realize, this word authenticity is the word. I want to be an authentic hermit, regardless of whatever happens with my canon law request, which I don't think it's going to happen, frankly. I don't. The young man from around the corner came to do my computer this morning and get this YouTube thing set up, and from what he told me of the young priest at the university, because this young man finished up his master's. He's an older young man. He's maybe 31 now or 32, but he says the priest is so busy. In over his head, has a whole lot on his plate. So, and I haven't had any response, and so I'm starting to think it's not going to happen, and I think I irked the maybe, but I wanted to know, what is it? It's told that there was this process, and then I don't think they have anything in writing. So, of the process, I want to know if there's something I needed to do, I'd get it done. But in the meanwhile, and I'm not hung up on it, because to me, I want to live what God chose me for and called me for, and I want to live authentically and live the canon law and live the catechism, what is expected in what's written in the catechism and in the canon law, and to be an authentic hermit and not to mess around with it, not to try to justify things or make up things. Or I'm very sincere and very genuine in my desire to please God. And I'm turning to Saint-Fiacre as my current mentor because of my delight in gardening. And I probably have a dozen herbs out there, but doesn't have to be herbs. But lots of vegetables. And um, and I offered to share with people, but they don't come to get. So I think I have lots of ribbons upstairs left over from my Joyful Hermit little enterprise I tried many years ago. I made Fortitude Fudge and St. Bernard Love of God bourbon balls and Joyful Hermit's Hermit cookies. But I could be licensed in the state I was in to do it at home. And I haven't checked out the licensing here, but I don't think. Maybe I could. If anybody wanted, when I get finished, I'd be happy to make some hermit cookies or some Love of God bourbon balls. Oh my goodness. They're powerful. They're powerful. You'll love anything once you have a couple of those. So it'll help you love anything. And then the Fortitude Fudge. Oh my, monastery used to sell it. They loved it. It's quite good. But again, my back hurt a lot to do it in bulk. And I didn't have much. I didn't make much to do it, but I did it for the fun of it and to pray. I pray while I was doing it. I would pray for the people who were buying it, or pray for the monastery that wanted it to sell. And it was a fun little short phase in my life. But I made Joyful Hermit's Mystical Mist, a Irish-based liqueur with 7 mystical infusions that are secret. They're secret. But it was delicious. But then I realized I couldn't sell booze. I'm so naive. I'm not a big drinker, but when people did come to my hermitage back in the Midwest, which was rare, but I would serve them if they wanted a little liqueur glass of mystical mist. And I also had a mint one, a mint, and a lemon balm one. So those were the 3 flavors I had experimented thus far with. But I see, that's why Fiacre reminds me with his little enterprises he had of, but also prayerful and helping people and the solitude that he wanted. And he didn't advertise himself as a hermit. He lived it. And he fled being tied to the temporal church, which is a beautiful thing, to the diocese. The diocese is in Ireland, to being an abbot again. He fled all that because and a hermit's life is to be lived in sacrifice and renouncing the temporal world, but also the world of the church. And the world of the church is a necessary world. Lovey, I'm coming. He can hear me talking. He's moaning. People, he's okay. He's fine. They've had a very short nap today, so he's not in any trouble. He just is very verbal and a character. Anyway, hermits, our lives are in effect in exchange for making up, for filling in for those that God chooses for active life in church ministry and in parish work and in diocese work. Like, I feel like my life and prayers are in help in providing prayer support and spiritual nurturing without any words exchanged, but just my desire for his soul to grow, for the canon lawyer, and he's also chancellor. So busy, I've irked him by writing too much to him. I've had to stop. I've apologized and stopped corresponding because nothing was going on. I thought, it shouldn't be too hard to meet with me, and you could probably figure me out in 5 minutes, if I'm genuine or not, and I would prepare anything about my lifestyle. They could come here and see that I'm doing my own manual labor very slowly, and making my way in life. I'm not taking anything from other people, and I would never have anyone foot my bill. So I'm very against that attitude. And of course, I blend in with everyone and live lean. So, but yes, so the hermit's life is to live that extreme of the spiritual life and prayer life and scripture and all, to pray for and build up the body of Christ and those in married vocations, single life, working in the parishes, working in the dioceses, even if they're not employed, those who are involved in the world of the church. And so that's part of the hermit's mission and effort. So God bless his real presence in us, and I'm going to go get the pups out. I got to mow still also. So God bless his real presence in us.